cathedral port made within 20 horsepower of a Frankenstein LS7 head, which is like, 20 horsepower cathedral port head, still making over 800 horsepower naturally aspirated on a hydraulic roller 427. That's pretty decent. At 4,200 RPM, the cathedral port head was making 100 foot-pounds more torque than the Frankenstein.
Holy crap.
Hey guys, I'm Josh Brown.
And I'm Jordan Stevens.
And you're watching the Cars and Health Bars podcast. Let's get right into the episode. Hey guys, welcome to Cars and Health Bars. On today, we are joined by Brian Tooley of BTR Brian Tooley Racing. How are you doing this morning, Brian?
Great. How about you guys?
Wonderful.
Ecstatic.
Yeah, so glad to have you back on. You know, of course, if our viewers missed it, we had Brian on a few years ago, after PRI at that time. But the way we're going to structure this show today is we're going to, catch up with Brian in this first little chunk here. And then we're going to be talking about, of course, Brian's new cylinder heads in the back half of this episode. But in the meantime, Brian's had a lot of other products come out since the last time we spoke to him. Of course, more recently, got a lot of new valve cover colors in production now.
Yeah. I'm really proud of the team for bringing all those colors to market. Because every color you add, if you do it on logo and no logo valve cover with and without coil packs, it's 4 SKUs. And obviously, the more SKUs you put in stock, the more SKUs you have to manage and try to keep in stock. And so there was some reluctance early on to add any more than the first 3 colors we offered. But, the operations people finally graciously conceded that, it's a great product, great profit margin. Frankly, it's one of our most profitable products we sell, absolutely the most profitable casting we sell. And so, they conceded to add more colors. And it's amazing how well that team works, because they have brought colors to market that I didn't even know they were bringing to market until, the marketing team's like, hey, these are done. And it's just like, that's kind of cool.
If I didn't know any better, I'd think that was something that Ethan Moss was spearheaded.
I don't know if he did or not. Ethan is he's a great guy. He's a maverick, and he is definitely an asset to the team.
Yeah, we had him on a few weeks ago. He was, he was such a character. I was so glad to have him on. His son watches the show, and he was like, man, you should have my dad on sometime. I'm like, who's your dad? He's like, Ethan Moss. He's like kind of high up in BTR. I'm like, shoot, send him our way. And I'm so glad to have him on. All the design, I didn't know he made all the designs and stuff for like the shirts and the banners. I was like, dang, that's so cool. I want one of those banners in my shop so bad. They're just like so out there, and I love it.
Yeah. He's done a lot of the design work. He has a lot of great ideas. So like I said, definitely a great asset to the company for sure.
Yeah, we didn't get to see him at PRI. We wanted to maybe link up with him, but I think he got snowed in or something.
Yeah, we were talking about it before the show. I want to hit on your car collection a little bit because, I knew of a few of them. I knew, of course, about the TRX and the yellow C5, but for our viewers that, might not know that side of Brian, I mean, you've got some pretty cool cars in your under your belt.
Yeah, I tend to buy, and I don't tend to ever sell. So then I tend to have a lot of cars.
It's a good habit.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a bad habit because you run out of space. But
fair enough.
Yeah, because now I daily drive a GMC AT4 that I bought last year, but I still have my T-Rex. And but I did have a 2019 Camaro that we made a lot of power to the tires with naturally aspirated. That engine made 740 to the crankshaft for power, stock short block. So very cool. Very cool project we did with that. But I love Corvettes. I've loved Corvettes since before Chevrolet moved Corvette assembly to Bowling Green, which is of course my hometown. And my dad's best friend had Corvettes the whole time I was growing up, and I just fell in love with them and just always loved them. And then having a performance shop in Bowling Green, when the C5 came out, and then eventually having a chassis dyno and working on those cars and driving customers' cars. So impressed with that C5 and the C506, and was eventually able to buy one. And actually, kept that car. So I bought that car when I was still in Bowling Green. So that was around 02, 03, and just got rid of that car last year, to give you some idea. And honestly, I got rid of it because I was out of room. It had to go. But you know, so the collection probably begins in 2018. I've got a 2019 ZR1. We initially road raced that some. When I was at Ron Fellows, you get a couple of days free at Ron Fellows, so learned a lot there. Excellent school. I was amazed at how rapidly they moved us through the pace, the exercises that they did. Learned a ton in 2 days. Way more aggressive course than I thought it would be. I thought it would be, way, way pampered down, but within no time they were balls out in those cars, and I was just like, "Wow, this is cool," because that's a very powerful car, right? Pretty fast, and so still have that car. I raced that car at NCM some, or maybe I should just say did HPDE days. That's not really racing, maybe, but had a lot of fun with that car. Eventually turned it into a drag car. Eventually went 870s with it,
Wow.
and it sets basically in that same form to this day. I guess it's probably my first collector car at this point. Um, and then in 2018, I did about slide that car off the track at NCM, and I decided that I needed a much less expensive car to make laps in at NCM. I did join the drivers club about that same time, and so I bought three C506s, one from me, my wife, and my son, and they're all O2, O3 C5Zs, and then we ended up putting like the same coilovers on them, pretty much same brakes. Left, we squared up the stock Z06 wheels on them, did the aero, night lives, front splitter, rear wing,
Yeah.
and so those have been just a ton of fun. Did put harnesses and all them seats in them. You got to put seats in those cars for sure. And then I've got a C6 that I've been building for years. It's a C6 drag car. Went through several iterations of want to be a heads up class car, and then SCT street racer, and finally we just turned that F3R 121 blower as slow as we could turn it, and turn it into a little gangster's car. It went 523 first time out, and so we're trying to slow it down to 530 to run that class. And then I've got a C7 that I bought from Dave Atkins. It's the I guess fastest LS powered Chevy bodied car in the world. It's been 380s, 199 in the eighth, and super fast twin turbo Noonan Billet 427 twin 88s. So we're racing that car. We went to World Series of Pro Mod and ran the I think True 10.5s. You were in the 10.5 28 tire, and we're campaigning that car with the guys from 10 Soldiers, Brad and Jason, wonderful guys. And so they finally went 420 at 193, I think. And the amazing thing about that was when it came back around to the pits, they pulled the spark plugs out, and none of the spark plugs showed any heat yet. And they were just like,
Wow.
holy cow, I can't believe this thing just went 193 in the eighth. It doesn't show any heat on the spark plugs. So it's going to be interesting because we changed up a fair bit since we bought that car from Dave Atkins, and really upgraded the turbos. So going to be interesting to see what the precision. We actually tested a set of force induction turbos, and the precisions were 7 mile per hour faster back to back. So thought that was interesting information, interesting data. I'm a highly data driven.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Testing is of course expensive, and few people do it, but you just learn so much when you do it. But and then a C8 Z06, I ordered a C8 Z06 with the ZDK track package, just like my C701. I ordered it with the ZDK package and got that. Well, after waiting 2 years, the dealership said if you want a C8Z, you're going to have to take one without the ZDK package. So I did, and then over the winter, a friend of mine that had ordered basically the exact same car that I've got, same color, same interior, same everything, had ordered the ZTK and got it, and then decided to get rid of the car. So I bought that So I need to sell the other CNC I've got. So right now I've got two of those, and then several sets of tires. You know, stock 4S tires. The Pilot Sport Cup 2Rs. I've got a set of forged lines with 19-inch forged lines that I put the Hoosier R7 slicks on,
Oh
which
yeah.
was that was a ton of fun because when you go to NCM, the Drivers Club, obviously you're dealing with a bunch of rich guys, right? And I don't even consider myself a rich guy in that crowd, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's guys there that are truly rich, hedge fund managers and whatnot,
Yeah.
and so you know they've got Porsche GT2 RS, McLaren 720, all those types of cars, and I'll catch them out on the track and sneak out there with the R7s on that car and just pass them, 5, 6, 7 seconds faster than they are, and,
Wow.
and they don't know what happened. They're like, it's my car broke, or something wrong. And actually, a 720S last year that I ran down and passed. After I passed him, I went ahead and got off track next time around, and he stayed on track for one more lap. And when he came off track, there was smoke billowing out of the rear of that car. Of course, they're vented, out in the
Yeah.
back hatch like
Yeah.
a C8, and so smoke just billowing out of this thing. I was like, my God, he's blown that thing up. And then, the fellow that waves us on track, I asked him about it, and the oil cap had come off the engine.
Oh
Lost,
man.
Wow.
oh yeah, lost the oil cap. So it's just like that doesn't sound. I don't know if somebody made a mistake reinstalling it, or it's just that poor of engineering. But I thought that
Yeah.
was very interesting because that had to have made a huge mess, and
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah.
he's like he didn't have a fire.
Yeah.
He's lucky he didn't lose traction or nothing either with that. I mean, get on the tires.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So those things have been those things are a ball for sure.
You
So
drove a lot of the best Corvettes. It sounds like a lot of people. The C8 was very controversial. There's like getting away from American muscle, starting to look more like I guess a European car with a mid-engine design. Out of all the Corvettes that you've had personal experience with, what would you say is your favorite Corvette?
This is not going to go the way you would think because when people come through my garage and they see that C7 ZR1 sitting there, it's the sea green orange and all that,
yeah.
Yeah.
and people are just like, "Oh my God, that's my favorite Corvette." It is not my favorite Corvette. I had a C6 ZR1 once, and the C6 that I've got has all the ZR1 body panels and hood and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I really like the C6 ZR1 body style. I really, really liked it. And then I guess from just driving experience, I really like the C8. I had a base C8 the convertible car, and they got Z mode on the steering wheel, which
Yeah.
raises the revs way up, and you get the little pop from the engine every time you upshift, downshift, and well, at least downshift. And man, you put the top down on that car and cruise around in Z mode. I promise you, if that's not the most fun you've ever had in a car, I'd probably kiss your butt. It's just cruising back roads on a nice day in that thing. It's incredible. But I will say that if you take one of those cars out to NCM with the stock 4S tires on it, compared to any of these C5Zs we've got with 200 treadwear tires, the C5Z with the 200 treadwear tire will run off and hide from one of those cars
Wow.
Really?
because they're too heavy, and those 4S tires are crap on the track because you know it's such a different experience because rather than 50-50 weight bias like a C5, C6, or C7, it's
Yeah.
40-60. And so it has this initial oversteer feeling. When you first turn the steering wheel into a turn, it turns right now, right? Because there's so much less mass in the front,
Mhm.
right? And you are further forward, so your body's physically moving faster than when you're further back in the car, and so you get this initial oversteer feeling, and then the 3,600 pounds or the convertible car 3,660 plus me, uh, all that mass is like, wait a minute, I'm still here, and then the car
Yeah.
pushes, so it goes from this oversteer feeling to then understeering and pushing through a turn, and it is very disconcerting. You know, the last thing you want is a car pushing you off the track through a turn. You know,
100%.
yeah. So it's way different feeling, but out on the street, it is phenomenal.
Would you say that you prefer road course racing more or the drag racing?
Well, you know, drag racing is so difficult. Like the drag racing we just did in January, February, going to the World Series of Pro Mod. Of course, you know, all of us guys that don't have a Pro Mod, we're all stepchildren out there. We get very few passes. Um, the logistics of just getting there, you know, it's a 14-hour drive if you don't stop. And then we tend to stop every few hours because we've got dogs and all this. And, you know, it stops and everything else. I mean, you know, it's 8 to 10 hours over 2 days. And then if you have any issue at all, now it's much longer days than that. Um, Something that shocked me that I still have not figured out the physics of. I think it must be just new ratchet strap syndrome. But you know, we have the C7 race car, of course, 2,500 pound car. On the bottom of the tractor trailer, we have my 3,000 pound C6 on the lift, and and with four straps X'd, you know, two in front, two in back, that car would come loose every 2 to 3 hours,
Whoa.
Really?
which is something I've never experienced before. And unfortunately, on the way back down in February, the first time I stopped, I forgot to check the straps. And then about 5 hours in, we made our second stop. 5 hours in, right? Made second stop. The front tire of the car was off the lift.
Oh
Oh,
my
wow.
god. I bet you were scared when you seen that.
Well, it's just I was the first thing I looked at to see if anything was scratched up the inside of the trailer of the car. And luckily, neither were scratched. Um, but yeah, you know, so we you know had to buy some tools. Went to a Harbor Freight parking lot, and I've got a Pro Jack. And a Pro Jack has a big chrome handle, probably 4 feet long, and I had to hold the handle under the car while my wife lowered the lift so I could get it back. So I could get it back on the lift. So
Lord.
and then and then the lift had always been cantankerous. The locks on the far end of the lift wouldn't unlock. Well, they chose that moment in time to completely quit disengaging. So then we couldn't
Oh,
even,
wow.
yeah, couldn't even let the lift down. So then I had to dig into what is wrong with the mechanism connecting the front to the back. You know, the handle that you turn,
Hmm.
and found the issue. It's bizarre. They had this square tube put over top of this, you know, metal piece, and it was just loose, and it would just turn inside that metal tube. And
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, so it's just amazing how hard it is to, you know, even getting to a racetrack that far away. For example, versus NCM, which is an hour and a half from the house. You know, you load cars up an hour and a half, you're not going to have an issue or problem. You know, you roll into the track, unload cars, and you know you're off having fun. And you know when you're at a drag race, you know there's a certain amount of anxiety. Um, you know, you're waiting for your class to get called, and it finally gets called, and you know you're taking your normal clothes off, trying to put your suit on. Of course, that's a you know my car is runs on M1, which means I have to run you know the same suit that a top fuel guy wears, right? The
Yeah.
20 layer. And so you've got this, you know, my race suit unfortunately is about 25 or 30 pounds. It's ridiculously heavy.
Wow.
A few years old, so I'm about to replace that. But you know, so we're in Florida. You know, some days are warm. You've got this unbelievably heavy race suit on, and then, you know, when you get strapped in that car, obviously full harness, you know, all the stuff, Hans, and, you know, and then you're just stuck there. And if there's problem in the staging lanes, if there's problems on the track, now you're just waiting
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
That
waiting
hot race suit.
and waiting. Yeah. And you are, you know, you're about to burn up before you can even get a burnout, as opposed to going to the NCM Motorsports Park. And the only thing you had to wear is a helmet, and you go, you know, you of course me, I can run, you know, the advanced class or the, you know, novice class out there on driving club day, which means I can run at any time, any part of the day, and so you know, just whatever you feel like making some laps, you just get in your car, put your helmet on, go on track. So the experience is really no comparison, right? It's just so much fun to go out there and make laps. It's one of those things I've heard about my entire life. It's a shame that I didn't experience that road course. I think so. 2017 was the first time I experienced a road course ever, HPDE day, and with the C606 I had at the time. And so let me see. So that was what, 9 years ago. So I've been 52 the first time I ever experienced, driving on a road course. So I would tell everyone, don't wait until you're 52 to go drive on a road course, right? Beg, borrow, or steal a decent car, put some decent tires on it, and go to an HPDE and make some laps. You'll fall in love with it for sure.
Maybe take a C5 there while you're at it.
Yeah, yeah. I highly recommend. They're light, they're cheap. Yeah, it's super fun car.
Yeah, I think they're one of the best LS cars that you could possibly buy. I mean, just for the price, and you can do so much with the platform.
Yeah, C5 and C6, because by the time you got to C7, they were too complicated. And by the time you get to the C8, I mean, I owned my C8 for a year before I found out where the battery was, right?
I don't even know where it is.
Yeah, when you raise the front frunk,
Mm-hmm.
toward the back, there's a plastic panel that's behind that plastic panel, and forget trying to get it on the lift. It
Yeah.
I like to never, because I have to I use the wheel dollies to position a car to get it on a 2-post lift, and with those 14-inch rear tires, those conventional wheel dollies won't jack up those rear tires. So I couldn't even get the thing on a lift for the longest time. Um, yeah, so it's yeah, they've just they've gotten too heavy and too complicated, the C7s and C8s, unfortunately. Great cars out of the box, don't work on them, right? I mean, they're just and I hate to say that, because that LT, the Gen 5 LT direct ejected engine is absolutely my favorite naturally aspirated engine of all time. It is such an impressive engine from a horsepower per cubic inch perspective. But they are that C7ZR1 that I had. Of course, we put 2 camshafts in it, 2 sets of two sets of cylinder heads, 2 sets of superchargers, right? 2 different superchargers, and so that's a lot of work to R&R all those components. And by the time you've removed and reinstalled that many components in C701, I promise you'll never want to work on one again for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I've pulled a couple C7 engines, and yeah, compared to the C5, C6, yeah, I'm not as big a fan. Getting around the motor mounts, oh, I think that was my least favorite part.
So much harder than it should be. And then they got rid of gaskets,
Yeah,
glued the engines together, which irritates me. But it is the Gen 5 stuff is absolutely the best pushrod engine ever made from an efficiency standpoint, horsepower per cubic inch standpoint, which I love. I'm an efficiency guy, right?
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
it may be, I love efficiency. So
Jordan, you had a question about the cams before we get on to the heads section.
okay.
Yeah, so what originally made you want to get into the camshaft market? Because it was really saturated. I kind of got an idea, but I just wanted to hear it from
Yeah.
you.
I'll be glad to tell you. So in 2001, when I bought a 5-axis CNC, we were picking up about the LS1 cars, LS6 cars, 40 those heads. We were picking those cars up about 40 or 50 real world horsepower, right?
Yeah,
And of course, maybe we were milling the heads and notching the pistons to get 50 real horsepower, but you could pick up a lot of power on an LS1 to LS6, and so I already had a lot of Ford business, the late 90s, early 2000s. So when I bought that 5-axis CNC in 2001, by the time you CNC the head, did a valve job, milled it, cleaned it, assembled it, we were charging maybe $1,000 labor to do that. 50 horsepower, decent power gains. Loved cylinder heads, of course. It was my passion. And and then sold that business to Summit Trick Flow in 2005. Well, it's so ironic. Within a month or two of me selling that business to Summit Racing Trick Flow, I got my hands on the first LS3 and first LS7 head that I'd ever seen. A buddy of mine was in Detroit, and he always dumpster dive, you know, and
Yeah.
he sent me one of each. And when I saw him, I was in disbelief. I was just like, holy crap, is this really going to be a production head? And then it was, you know, and so then porting an LS3 head, you went from making, gaining 40, 50 horsepower from the porting to 20, right? And
Yeah.
really the head was too big to start with. So porting it, yeah, you can pick up power, but you're really making the head too big because it's too big stock, right? 260 cc is
Yeah.
too big stock. And so, the CNC porting, the stock castings just didn't make as much sense to me because the cost of CNC and valve job, clean, assemble, all that stuff, that price is only going up. Meanwhile, the performance is going down. At the same time, we did some camshaft development at Trick Flow, and you're seeing 60, 70 horsepower gain from a $400 camshaft. Excuse me. So when I left Trick Flow Summit, I didn't have any intentions, honestly, of getting back in the performance industry. The performance industry had, I would say, not been very kind to me. I started Total Engineer Flow in 1993. Was hired into Holly Product Development, 94, 95, quit in 96. That was the worst work experience of my entire life. And then, frankly, Trick Flow Summit was not much better. I was not treated very well there. And so, it's just like I need to go find something else to do. When I got out of the Navy when I was 24, I was a maintenance mechanic in a factory for 4 years. Probably the best job I ever had in my life. The better you are at fixing and maintaining equipment, the less work you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you become like a fireman, right? You're just standing
Yeah.
around waiting for something to break.
Yeah.
And the better you are, literally, the better you are working on equipment, maintaining equipment, right? Because you got to maintenance it, you got to grease it,
Yeah.
and the less work you're going to have to do. And so when I left Summit Racing Trick Flow, I did get my real estate license. I've always been interested in real estate. I did day trading for a year. Don't recommend that. Um, yeah, there's too many people in the world who are really good at that, and
That's fair.
yeah, they call it fleecing the sheep. And if you think you're going to get into day trading knowing nothing, you're going to get fleeced. And and so, but then I saw an opportunity to sell valve spring kits in the basement, and started doing that. And then the business took off from there.
I can see why you'd want to get out and start your own business. So after the history you'd had with working for other companies.
Yeah. So the gains from camshaft. So to gain 60 or 70 horsepower from a camshaft change,
Yeah.
or a $400 camshaft and maybe $300 spring kit and some push rods and some gaskets, that was a far better bargain than porting heads. And,
Yeah.
so that's why I decided to go in in the camshaft business. And, initially just went into the valve spring business, but I had learned a lot about camshafts the last couple of years at Trick Flow. One of the best things that I did was I created a simple spreadsheet. You just enter the duration, intake duration, exhaust duration, intake exhaust center line, and it would calculate the open close events. Intake open close, exhaust open close events, and really studying those is something that I did because everybody else's calculator they would look at intake open close and exhaust open close. Well, those events don't happen in that order, right? The exhaust opens,
Yeah.
right? And then you've got your overlap, and then
Mm-hmm.
the intake closes. And so I actually did that calculation like that in the event in the order those events happen, and and frankly looked at everyone's cam specs, put them all in this spreadsheet: LS1, LS2, LS3, 408, 427, LS7, turbo blower, you name it, any camshaft I could get specs on. And then I really started studying those open close events, and and really learned a ton because the intake valve close, everybody knows, is the most important point. Well, if you're not really focused on that intake valve close point while you're designing your durations and center lines, you can get out in left field and really make a terrible camshaft. It's not going to perform well. And anyway, seeing those trends with that spreadsheet, and I shared that spreadsheet in 2010, 2011. I shared that spreadsheet with John Bewley, who was a truck driver at the time, and then Jonathan at Tick. And then it was so interesting because John eventually came off the road, wanted to come work for me. We started LJMS, built him a website. He started selling products. And then we were working closely with Tick on the timing events. And I spent a lot of time on the phone with Martin Smallwood, teaching timing events. And then unfortunately that relationship went sideways between us, which is very unfortunate. Um, and then, we just, um, doing cam kits in the basement, started that business by myself and then hired my son and then hired my next door neighbor. And then we moved out of the basement in 2014, right? And then, just 11 years later, last year, sold that. So I sold the business to the employees in 2018. And then just 4 years after moving out of the basement. And basically the way that employee ownership works is, you get a valuation for the business, and the valuation at that time was still a 8-digit valuation for me at 6 times EBITDA. And so I got an IOU for that amount of money. But then that note collects interest. And so the company owes me interest on that note every year. The amazing thing was if you're S Corp and you do 100% sell with an ESOP, you're exempt from federal or state taxes, income taxes, which when I first heard that, I was just like, that can't be true because
Yeah.
that was the Obama era. We were paying 39.6 federal plus 5%, Kentucky, and then another couple of local 0.5%. So you might as well say 50% of our profits went away in paying income taxes. And when I found out that we wouldn't have to pay income taxes on those profits, I was like, that can't be true. Well, I found out it actually is true. Of course, that's the stipulation. It has to be S Corp, has to do 100% sell, right? And so did that sell to the employees in 2018. And then initially, it actually hurt the culture. An IOU for 8 digits shockingly basically ruined my management team, something I didn't see coming. Because I told them, like, hey, you guys stick with me. You guys will be millionaires, possibly multimillionaires someday, and
Yeah.
they couldn't see the future. They only saw that they didn't get anything. They weren't paying attention to the fact I didn't actually get a dollar at that time. All I got was an IOU, right?
Yeah.
And but then the people that came in behind them, were like, "What? This is employee owned. I earn stock by just working. It doesn't cost me a penny." They thought it was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And so we grew the business and grew the business and grew it, and then was approached. We were approached a couple of times by private equity. We were approached again last year in 2025, and we got a very good offer, a little over 7 times EBITDA, and that put almost $40 million in the pockets of the employees there. Um,
Wow.
yeah, which is, I would like to think that that's the best thing that I've ever done for people in my entire life was that employee ownership and then subsequent sell to private equity. A lot of people think selling to private equity is a horrible idea, but then they don't understand all the other stuff that we want to do and how much money it's going to cost us, right? Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally own the buildings, and I've already personally have spent 4.5 million on the buildings we have now, and then the 83,000 square foot expansion that is currently underway is another $8 million expansion, and that's all on me personally, which is a lot of money. And so,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, ton of
It's
money.
like the definition of got to spend money to make money.
It's true. It's true. And you can't, space, what happens with business is ultimately you are choked by something. And in the e-commerce space, you're ultimately choked by space. You have to have space.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when we moved into the first 15,000 square foot building, I told my people, I said, we'll be out of room in 5 years. And 5.5 years, we moved into the 30,000 square foot expansion. So at that point, we're tripling our room. And we were absolutely out of room at that 5.5 year mark. And then they asked me, they said, how long will it be before we outgrow, this space? And I said, we'll outgrow this space in about 3 years. And they said,
Wow.
well, the math doesn't math there because, so we tripled our space, but we're outgrowing it. We're going to outgrow it in a shorter amount of time. And I said, that's correct because the velocity at which we're adding inventory is ever increasing because we were selling more each year at higher profit margins, which meant that we were adding product to the shelf at an ever increasing rate. Right. And,
Yeah.
to give you some idea, 2004, I think, or not 2004, geez, in 2020, I think we hit about, COVID era. I think we hit about 4 million in inventory. And I was just like, holy crap, that's a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
Well, a few years later, we were at 10 million. Right. And, that takes a lot of space to put that much product on the shelf. And then once we went into manufacturing, having camcorders in stock, having all those castings ready to machine, it's just a lot of space.
Absolutely.
I want to thank Blackout Coffee for sponsoring this episode of the Cars and Health Bars podcast. As you know, I work a blue-collar job just like most of you all do, and I need me a cup of joe to get me started first thing in the morning. I always like to hit some of this dark roast, brother. It puts hair on your chest, gets you good and woke up. And hey, if you got a wife like mine that loves some coffee, they've also got flavored coffee options such as jelly donut, salted mocha, cinnamon French toast. Look at the ratings on that, brother. Almost 1,500 5-star reviews. I've been drinking some of that good dark roast to get me started. And hey, they've even got instant coffee. We've all been there running late for work. Grab you one of these and dump it in your water bottle. You got coffee on the go. I want to again thank Blackout Coffee for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Go on over, support our sponsors, support our troops. Good old America. Get you a cup of Blackout Coffee, brother. Our first sponsor today, of course, you know them, you love them, Chemical Guys. They have the best car care products in the game. Of course, my favorite products here, you got the starter kits. I highly recommend the starter kits to any of our listeners because it is the greatest way to get a bulk amount of products. It's just the best bang for your buck. Even the mini arsenal, it comes with everything you need. It's got the honeydew soap. It's got the spray wax. It's got the bucket, the foam cannon. It's got everything you need. This Cars 10 site-wide for 10% off your order. And our next sponsor today is Badass Extension Cords. They've got some of the highest quality extension cords in the game here. Got their outdoor extension cords pulled up. What I really like about them is they have all these customizable colors that you can do, and you can even have unique writing on them to make them say whatever you want. They've got the 50-foot pro cable with 6 outlets going along the whole entire cord. These cords are some of the highest quality that you have around. You need some of these in your shop. Even the indoor ones, they go all the way up to 100 foot. They go all the way down to 25 foot. Why not pick up a badass extension cord for your shop so you can make sure that you do not lack anything whenever it comes to working on your project. You need that for those power tools. You know you do. That being said, guys, head on over to Badass Extension Cords, pick you up a cord, and use our affiliate link so they know we sent you. I want to thank Speedway Motors for sponsoring the podcast. One of my favorite parts, wiring harness. They have a DIY wiring harness. So if you are not that good at wiring, they have a full kit that is a universal. You just pick what circuit you want. It is as simple as you get it. They have a lot of parts for your older cars. It's hard to beat these deals. Some of the best prices. That's always what I've known them for is the really good prices, the really good quality. So yeah, guys, hop on over there. See if they've got something for your build and use our affiliate link so they know that we sent you. And with that being said, guys, let's get right back into the topic.
How has it been expanding into the cylinder head manufacturing? How much space has that took up?
It's not taken up a ton. I would say, honestly, it's probably only taken up a few thousand square feet. We have a Mazak C600 pallet pull machine that has 24 pallets, and we can put 2 heads per pallet. We currently only have 12 pallets with cylinder heads on them, but like I said, we can put 2 cylinder heads per pallet, so it's 24 heads. There are 4 operations per cylinder head.
Oh
And
wow.
so, so that sort of has to go from, the first operation pilot to the second operation pilot, the third operation pilot to the fourth before it's finished. But, you have to understand that during those processes, those operations, you're installing an intake seat, you're boring the exhaust for a interlocking exhaust seat.
Hmm.
You're inserting powder metal guides. You're sizing the powder metal guides on a CNC. So there's a lot of operations that happens. Um,
As a CNC machinist by trade, I was curious myself. How long does the operation take from like I understand you got different operations, but from start to finish, from like how it comes from the foundry to how it ends up on the website? How much machine time does that take?
Machine time right now it's about an hour, which is
Wow.
which is actually a little long. We were
Yeah.
hoping we could do that in 45 minutes. Um, so, but something that we did right very well. Fortunately, through you know, they say relationships and having friends in low places. So I've got a friend who works on the assembly line north of Nashville, Tennessee, where Chevrolet actually produces all the Gen 5 LT1 heads.
Okay.
And so I was just like, hey, could you happen to get me a picture of the tooling that you guys use? Which
Ha ha
I
ha.
don't think, I don't think Chevrolet would care, right?
Yeah.
And so we established a relationship with that tooling manufacturer, and so the tooling that Chevrolet uses to, bore for the seats, to
Hmm.
size the guides, to do a lot of those operations, we bought that same tooling from that same tooling company, same tooling vendor. And, so that's really allowed us to, machine those heads much faster. You being a CNC machinist, you understand, machining parent metal, so you got, parent metal,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know, seats and guides, and then honing the guide once it's inserted, the powder metal guide. Um, frankly, having that relationship with him, getting that information was, nothing short of a godsend from my perspective, right? And
Yeah.
it really that's what's happened with BTR. In the 12 years since I moved out of the basement, it's just I know this day and age. I think God's not very popular in our culture, and but I can tell you, man, if you don't think the people at BTR and BTR have been extraordinarily blessed in the 12 years since I moved out of the basement, think again, right? I mean, the things that have happened, it's just nothing short of you know, incredible, just huge blessing. Um, so yeah, so the cylinder head deal, that the idea for the Canted valve heads. I actually, when I was at Trickflow, we developed all these heads. One of the first heads we developed, was the Cathedral Port Trickflow heads, and then we eventually had to develop ports for, their Ford High Port head and the Twisted Wedge heads and their Cleveland heads and the A460 big block Ford head. So we're developing ports, well, and the two valve modular cylinder head. And
Yeah.
that cylinder head was actually my idea, my design, and you know, quite a bit of effort went into that cylinder head, and then LS3, LS7 heads was on our list, and I wanted to, and really this idea came from the LS7 because I'm looking at LS7 head one day, which is the only LS head that ever had the pedestals made into the casting, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm
Hmm.
looking at LS7 head one day, it's around 2008, and I'm looking at it, and I was like, you could move that pedestal mounting point and that valve, you could move those together and
Yeah.
have a canted valve head, right? And I was
Yeah.
just like, this is a fantastic idea, but I didn't present it to TrickFlow because of all the drama that occurred via when we were testing the two valve modular head. There was actually a lot of drama in durability testing that head there, unfortunately. Long story, but anyway, because of that, I was just like, there's no way I'm deviating from stock geometry on anything again ever. While I was there, I did make the decision to roll the LS3 head from 15 degree to 12 degree, basically just make the intake
Yeah.
center line just stock LS7, and then move the exhaust valve 50 thousandths for increased cylinder wall clearance, because people think an LS7 head won't fit on a smaller bore because of that big 2200 intake valve. They don't realize it's actually an exhaust valve that hits the cylinder, right, in a smaller bore engine. So anyway, so putting that smaller LS3 diameter valve in that trick flow LS3 head, moving that exhaust valve over 50,000s, allows that to fit a 4-inch bore. But still, at that time, it was stock geometry. At that time, those LS3 heads were designed to have LS7 rockers, so it was stock 12-degree LS7 geometry. Then I left, and then they put 1.7 rockers on it, LS rockers, which is a whole another story there. But anyway, so the gentleman who founded Trick Flow in the 80s and sold it to Summit in 93, a gentleman named Rick Smith, tried to hire me into Trick Flow in 1996, which is what eventually led Trick Flow Summit to buy my business in 2004. And so in 2018, when I had the ability to hire him into BTR, of course I did. And he's just once again, godsend, wonderful man. And everybody assumed we'd be making solar heads right out of the gate. And I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
we're going to make simple stuff that doesn't hold water. We're going to make intake manifolds, valve covers. And once we get good at making simple stuff, then we'll try to make something more complex. And it's a good thing we did it in that order, because if we had done the cylinder head idea early on, like 2019, 2020,
Yeah.
it would have potentially put us out of business.
I felt like we were waiting on these heads forever. I mean, we were talking about these heads back in, I think 2022, whenever we originally had you on.
Yeah, yeah, we had castings in hand. Now they were made from 3D printed sand
Right.
cores and molds, but yeah, we had castings in hand in 2022, spring of 2022, right? And so that's how long this process has taken. I mean, it's 4 years and over $2 million.
Yeah. I gotta ask, why did you go with a porter's head instead of selling like a bolt-on head? I imagine, machine time and cost has a lot to do with that. But just for our viewers, why did you
Yeah,
decide to go with the porter head?
I will be glad to share the methodology behind that and the strategy. There's methodology and then there's strategy. So I'll talk about the methodology first. So when we went with this semi-permanent mold tooling, so semi-permanent mold tooling is very rare in the aftermarket solar head market, right? Almost no one spends hundreds of thousands of dollars to make a semi-permanent mold solar head tool,
Mm-hmm.
right? They make them out of air set or green sand, right? Much more affordable casting process, much more affordable tooling. But we wanted, um, I guess it's like our valve covers. We first did our valve covers in green sand, and the clarity of the logo was not good. There was some porosity, blah blah blah, and then we looked into doing a die cast tool, and the die cast tool we got a much better casting. The logo was improved. I swear 10,000%, and the piece price went down to a third what we were paying for green sand castings.
Whoa.
So you get a better casting for less money. And that's kind of what happens with semi-permanent mold, because, the bottom of the head is made with, a steel. You've got a steel mold. The exhaust side of the head is made with a steel mold. It's on this slide mechanism. So anytime you're using a steel mold instead of a sand core that's being broken down, because a lot of people don't realize that each cylinder head, for example, like say air set, you're making a cope, a drag, all these cores. It's this humongous cube that you pour aluminum in, and then you break all that sand off, and it's gone, right? So
Yeah.
every set of molds and cores only makes one cylinder head. So when you go semi-permanent mold, you have so much less molding on the outside of the head, so much less sand involved, much less molds, cores. But the other benefit is, because you have less sand, you also get less outgassing from the binders in the sand, because the binders that bind that sand together, when heated, can outgas and cause porosity, right? And then you also end up with a faster cycle time. So you've got You've got less cost because you're not making, great big humongous sand
Yeah.
molds. You've got better quality because you've got less outgassing, less porosity, and then you've got faster cycle time, which actually yields lower cost.
Right.
So if you can afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a semi-permanent mold tool, that's the thing to do. So that's what that's what we did on the tool. Um, and then what was the next thing I was going to lead into with that? Um, sorry, my old age
No,
and ADD catching up here.
you're good. That reasons like that are why I love the BTR brand, like with the Spintron on cam design, and the R&D that BTR puts into their product is bar none, I would argue.
Yeah, we definitely try to do everything better than the next guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
and
think
it's
price too was such a huge factor for you, and I feel like now it's like downhill. The price for the cylinder heads, and you're battling some big dogs, Brian. You talking about a head that needs finishing for. I mean, what do you have them listed for? Like $999.99 retail, or sorry,
so
Uh,
seven. My
yes, yeah. So the heads around 700-800 bucks each retail. So we were talking about the methodology and the strategies. So
yeah,
yeah.
when we went to this semi-permanent mold tool, there's a shrink rate that you have to factor in when you make the tooling, right? And let's say the shrink rate is 7 thousandths per inch. So when you make an air set tool, you physically stretch the model, the cylinder head model, 7 thousandths per inch, and
Yeah.
then you pour the casting, and once it cools down, you hope that all the features in the correct place,
yeah.
right? Well, the dimensions that the foundry was giving us off the semi-permanent mold tool were really high, higher shrink rates than anything we had ever seen, something like in the 9.5, 10, 11, 12 thousandths per inch range, which didn't sound right to us. And so we realized what we were going to have to do is come out with a porter's casting first. And then once we had production heads, put them on the CMM, measured the intake port center lines and see if they are 4.400 or if there's something other than 4.400. And then we could then use that math to make the final intake and exhaust port cores to make the as cast heads.
Okay.
Okay. Because the as cast head, because you're making an as cast head, those intake and exhaust ports, they have to be exactly in the correct place. And if they're not, then you're giving up airflow and power, right?
Right.
So that's the methodology behind doing the porter's castings first, and then the ass cast heads as soon as we possibly can. As soon as we can
That's
get the tooling made, the ass cast heads will launch. But then there's also strategy behind this because this is something I learned in the basement selling valve springs. Right when I launched this business to sell valve springs out of my basement, it was selling these valve springs to dealers only. I didn't really have any intention of being, some retail powerhouse. I was in the basement by myself, right?
right.
And so the way I really launched the valve springs is, of course, back then it was easy. You had ls1tech.com and Corvette Forum, and everybody in the LS community was on one of those too. And so I called and emailed every single LS performance shop, installation shop, everyone in the country. I even called and emailed people who disliked me because of my time spent CNC porting heads at Kirkflow Summit. And and as I could get in touch with these shop owners, I would educate them as to why this platinum spring was so good. We did spintron testing at TrickFlow. We did durability testing at TrickFlow. And then we sold that platinum spring for 6 years without a single failure, which is unprecedented, right? And so the lesson that I learned from contacting all those shops and doing that education is they then started recommending those springs kits to their customers. Well, their customers, they may live in a city or state that's got 7, 8, 9% sales tax. So guess what their customers would do? They would get on our website and buy them and say that say that cell stacks, right? And so I learned the power of educating people as to what works, and then word of mouth, right? Word of mouth absolutely grew BTR initially. So I knew the way that we were going to have wide acceptance of our cylinder heads in the market was by launching a porter's casting first. And here's why. So you have to go all the way back to the 90s when I started porting heads. In the 90s, um, none of the cylinder head manufacturers in the United States offered their own cylinder head CNC ported, right? CNC porting was a brand new thing. AFR was really first to market in a large scale. That was the late 90s. And so, when I bought a 5-axis C in 2001, I'm porting trick flow heads, Edelbrock heads, Canfield heads. I'm porting all these heads because the manufacturer didn't offer those heads ported. Well, that fell one by one by one. Okay. By the time I sold my business to Summer Racing Trick Flow in 2004, they were the only cylinder head manufacturer in the United States who did not offer their cylinder head CNC ported. Right. So I saw the writing on the wall from the mid '90s when I started totally engineer flow to 2004. It's just like, you know, porting aftermarket heads is coming to an end because all the aftermarket manufacturers bringing that in house, right? And so, but what that did, the unintended consequences of that was all of these shops that had CNC machines, ported heads, and all that stuff. It starved those guys of work,
I can see
right?
that. Yeah.
Starved them of work. So guess what we've done? We've reversed that. We just gave them all something to do.
Yeah. Gave them heads to work on.
Because porting stock castings sucks. Because most of them are already too big, they're
Yeah.
too thin, they're not designed to be ported, right? I mean, we've been doing this supercharger testing on an LT4, and incurred an issue during testing, and took the cylinder head off, and it had been CNC ported so thin that it blew a hole between the intake and exhaust port bulbs,
Wow.
Wow.
right? And so these OE heads are just they're just not great heads to port. And the other thing, to get 100% cleanup on a stock casting is very difficult. And you can port a pair of heads, and you can have one intake or exhaust port that has one spot not as big around as a dime where the casting doesn't clean up,
Mm-hmm.
and the customer will call you, "Hey man, why didn't you port my heads all the way?" And it's just like,
Yeah.
trust me, the CNC ran over top of it. It just didn't touch that area, right?
Yeah.
And so porting stock castings is very difficult. It's not a great business model. Of course, you're dealing with used castings. They're dirty. You got to clean them up. That's not necessarily easy as well. So giving all these shops something to port, frankly, a lot of them are elated. GPI was probably the early adopters on our cylinder head. They actually, Aaron, who's the owner of GPI, came to BTR, brought their best LS3 heads, which is a Brodix LS7 casting, small bore casting.
Yep.
And so we dyno tested those. And at the point that we were about 20 horsepower ahead of those heads, I sent him a sample head, and he called me. He said, "We're going to quit selling the Brodix head. We're only going to sell your head."
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah. I mean, 20 horsepower, who's going to say no to that?
Exactly.
And so and of course, designing it around the LT1 valves, you got a nice 93 gram hollow stem valve where everyone else selling LS3 heads in the market, they're using a stainless valve, right? No one is offering titanium for sure. And I don't know hardly anyone offering a hollow stem valve unless it's just a secondary option, and those, huge 2165 valves in stainless, solid stem stainless. I mean, they're 120 gram intake valves. That 120 gram intake valve is very difficult to control and very problematic. Obviously, it's very unstable at higher RPM. And then you end up having lots of valve train issues, right?
Yeah.
That mass, that heavy a valve is so hard to control. Basically, you're not going to control it hardly pass 7,000 RPM unless you just put very special baby soft lobes on the camshaft. And so the people who are trying to spin those things hard, or let's say road racing them, they end up failing, because closing valves, when that valve is supposed to close and instead it's bouncing, it's hammering everything.
Yeah.
It's hammering
Yeah.
the seats in the head. It can hammer the valve hard enough that the valve head pops off the valve, right? It's hammering rocker arm trunnions and really hammering the lifter. The lifter is probably the weak link in an LS valve train at this point. And so that's why you see a lot of lifter failures because it's just the weakest link. I feel like it used to be the valve spring, and the valve springs got good enough that it's just the lifter failing, right? And so we knew that we needed a light valve option. And so, we're selling those hollow stem LT1 valves. We actually were able to go direct to the manufacturer who makes them for Chevrolet and get an unbelievable price on them. I mean, we sell those valves to dealers for, I'm not even going to tell you how cheap, because retail they're only about $15 a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which for a hollow stem valve, if you had to go to Ferrea and buy a hollow stem valve for somebody else, well, you're probably spending $30 a piece for a valve.
Yeah. I just bought a set from GM. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you paid over $20 a piece.
Yeah. Not cheap.
Yeah. You could have came to us and bought the same valve for around $15.
Maybe that's what we did. I can't remember. I think I did pay $15-16 with that shop's discount. I think I got those, and I got a set of valve springs from you because I just had lifter failure, unfortunately, in my build.
Oh, what, in a Gen 5 engine?
No, LS3.
LS3, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you're dealing with the LS3 hollow stem intake valve.
I actually
No,
mine was
he's
L99, so
L99.
I had the heavy ones. Yeah. So,
Oh, you had to hit it off. Yeah.
yeah. But
Now,
redoing
baby,
everything, thankfully.
yeah, and that heavy valve in that engine is about 110 grams L99, and once again, even 110 grams. I mean, once that valve gets over about 100 grams, with all the, because you look at everybody's lobe designs, those lobe designs, they're designed for LS1 valves, LS3 valves, LS7 valves, which is titanium. They're not really designed for valves over 100 grams. And so when you get into heads that actually have 110, 120 gram valves, you have long-term durability issues.
Yeah. I want to hit on the these heads, they came out. I mean, what day did you put them out? Because I feel like I found them on the website before there was very much PR, because a friend of mine, he's got a guy on the inside at BTR that he's buddies with, because he had a set of heads before I even knew they were out yet. I had to do some research, and I didn't actually find it on the website without a part number, because I wouldn't say very much PR about it, because I guess you knew they were going to be on back order. I mean, those heads flew off the shelves before there was even shelves, I feel like.
Yeah. We were not getting the volume of castings from the foundry that we had hoped. Of course, we thought we were going to launch these heads in February 2025. Because the tooling was finished around December 24, January 25. So we thought we were launching these heads a year ago. And then we had frosty problems, really blow problems that comes from the gating and riser design that the foundry chose for our cylinder head. And then we ended up having a metallurgy issue, which, they call it long dendrite arm spacing for the engineering guys. But basically, I was talking about air set tooling and green sand tooling. A lot of those toolings, they'll have what's called combustion chamber shields, which you have these four pucks that are made of cast iron or aluminum that's in that's in the mold. And so when that aluminum is poured, those chills or pucks pull the heat out of that aluminum and start the solidification, from the bottom of the casting up, which is what you want. So we kind of knew that. No one internally to BTR was an expert on semi-permanent mold ceramic tooling for sure. We picked up a consultant around March, April last year, and he said, look, he deals with all the OEs that have semi-permanent mold castings cylinder heads tooling, and he said 100% of them have water cooling through the chambers. And our foundry said, you're not going to bring water into our foundry, because water, when it flashes to steam, expands
Yeah.
16 times, which is also known as a bomb, right?
Yeah.
And so they wanted to exhaust every possible scenario of gating, risers, everything, and we just never could get the um, mechanical material properties that we needed on the deck of that head in the chamber. So they finally conceded to that we were going to have to water cool the casting. So had to pull the tooling from the foundry, send it out, get it machined for the water cooling, and bring it back in house and work through all that. So we really thought, once we had the water cooling and all of these things done, we were really going to hit the ground running. Well, they started pouring heads, and they were still having about 40 or 50% fallout. And so, then they're going to have to work through all their processes. And they found out they had silly stuff like two of the combustion chamber water hoses were switched. So when they're trying to regulate temperature to one, they're actually screwing up the different one. And so it's just stuff, that issues they really shouldn't have had. And so we did have a small enough quantity. We were receiving a small enough quantity of castings that, I said, let's just launch the cylinder heads. We'll do a soft launch. We initially sold them only to dealers. So that was simply, sales guys getting on the phone, calling a dealer, hey, these things are, if you want to put an order in, we're going to start shipping them. But we didn't even make a, social media post about it, or launch the heads, or even put them on the website. They weren't on the front end of the website. And so, yeah, we, you don't want to, I think, make a huge splash about a product that you don't really have.
That's fair.
Right. And so, they have cast over 100 LS3 castings thus far this month, which is pretty good. And so looking forward to getting all those in house, and they're spending the rest of the month casting the cathedral port. The cathedral port is selling a little higher volume than the LS3 square port, but you can put those heads on a 5.3, 5.7.
Oh, yeah.
They fit everything. And that cathedral port head on a 800 horsepower 427 made within 10 horsepower of the LS3 port, and the cathedral port made within 20 horsepower of a Frankenstein LS7 head, which is like, 20 horsepower cathedral port head, still making over 800 horsepower naturally aspirated on a hydraulic roller 427. That's pretty decent. At 4,200 RPM, the cathedral port head was making 100 foot-pounds more torque than the
Holy crap.
Whoa.
a street car. You're going to feel that,
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you've got a heavy street car with a tight converter, that cathedral port head's going to outrun that big head.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, it's kind of a soft launch. So we are working on the ASCAST tooling, the ASCAST intake exhaust ports now. And our ASCAST heads are going to be just like the ASCAST heads I designed at Trick Flow. So I'm the guy that brought the ASCAST model to Trick Flow, because I told him, I said, I think if we did a CNC blow blend on the ports and CNC the chamber, we could still get almost CNC airflow power numbers, except mostly cast intake and exhaust ports. And that's exactly what we got. We had a Gen 2 Chevy LT1 head that the production head was within 1% of the flow model as cast, which is pretty incredible. So we're going to, because it's a relatively easy process, because you take your CNC port design in CAD, you add some material around the valve guide boss, so you got enough material there.
Yeah.
And then you shrink back the throat, like where it approaches the seat, you shrink it back like this, and then you just CNC that material away to match the seat valve job. And, you can get very high flow even with a cast intake exhaust port. So we're excited about the ASCAST heads. I will say at least one of the CNC shops we're working with asked us to not make the ASCAST ports as good as we probably could make them.
Yeah.
But, that's not how we roll. We're going to make stuff absolutely as good as we can possibly make it, because the thing about, they talk about planned obsolescence. The people at Chick-fil-A even, they wanted planned obsolescence and all these things. And the thing about planned obsolescence is just time and education is going to obsolete things. You can do something the absolute best that you possibly can today, and within a year or two, you're going to learn something that obsoletes that product. Right? We've kind of experienced that with the camshaft development. Right? We discover this and discover this and discover this, and it's like, man, okay, well, now I need a V2 camshaft. Now we need a V3 camshaft.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people have asked me. I had a guy the other day said, in your LS7 V2 cams, do you plan to come out with a V3 version? And I said, well, not right now, because we don't know of anything we can do to make more power. But in that, it may stay that way for a few years, and it may change tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
And so, that's the thing about technology and learning and testing stuff. You're always learning, always changing. But yeah, so we're going to put our best foot forward with the ASCAST heads. We expect them to launch in probably July time frame. It's probably going to take that long to get the tooling finished and the CNC program finished. CNC program won't take long, actually. But the tooling is going to take about 3 months to make. And before we make the tooling, we're actually going to 3D print the intake and exhaust port cores, put them in the casting, and then get those castings in house, machine them, and make sure the targeting of all the intake and exhaust port cores are exactly where we want them before we pull the trigger on the production tooling.
That's so exciting. I know there's going to be a lot of people trying to pick up these heads, with them. I honestly feel like doing a small launch, that's going to create so much like people, you're going to see the people who do go through with, porting them out, and they're going to be doing PR basically for you, because they're going to be showing videos of their power gains and how they're performing, them beating people on the racetrack. And that's going to be even more people waiting for that back order button to turn into a cart button,
Yeah, I mean, look at one of our biggest supporters, like I mentioned, GPI.
Yeah.
If we had come out with our heads and only we CNC ported them, because like a trick flow, as we were releasing, as we were bringing the CNC porters castings, to market basically, so we could CNC port these heads for trick flow. Trick flow would not sell those castings to anybody else, right? They wanted, all that CNC porting market for themselves, but they're really shooting themselves in the foot, in my opinion, because, they're just starving these guys of work who could be CNC porting heads and selling them that likely would do better ports in chambers than what Trickflow themselves is doing, right? And GPI is a good example of that. We sent them one LS1 casting, one LS3 casting with one cylinder basically ported, right? Intake port, exhaust port, combustion chamber, valve job. We sent it to them, and and they looked at it all, floated, worked on it some, and said, we're probably just going to digitize your cathedral port head, but we came up with what we feel like is a better LS3 port than what you sent us, right? And so, so now we're making we've turned a shop that if we'd gone the trick flow route, where only we CNC port them, now we're competing against everybody who sells head CNC port heads, right?
Right.
We're competing against every shop out there, right? Well, now, because we've given shops like GPI CNC work to do, now they've got a product that they can sell and promote, and their customers can make more power than ever. And if things go well, it's also going to be one of the most rigid heads, LS heads ever produced in terms of holding the head gasket.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that we did in the water jacket. So the water jackets are all 100% 3D printed sand cores, and that's actually where the patent stems from, is that water jacket. Some of the things we did in there, and there's things in that water jacket that is going to help retain head gaskets that you can't normally do in a normal the tooling that normally makes the that water jacket core. With the 3D printing, there's things that you can do to make the head better, make the cooling around spark plug better, make the holding head gasket rigidity better that you just can't do with conventional tooling. So very excited about that.
So it sounds like these heads are just going to be monsters for boost as well. I mean,
Yeah,
high
yeah.
cylinder pressures shouldn't be a problem at all.
No, they should retain a head gasket better than about anything out there.
Well, it sounds like Josh here needs to get a set already.
Yeah,
He's boosted.
I didn't, like I said, my engine, I didn't anticipate all this to happen. It's kind of funny because I bought all the stuff to do my top end before this happened. I had, like I said, a lifter failure, and it basically, a roller had a party in my bottom end, and I got very fortunate. It didn't pinch that roller between my crank and wall because my block is okay. But yeah, I had bought everything to do that. I think I got springs, valves, I got everything but a head to do top end before this had happened. So I'd probably be interested because the shop that I'm working with, he's really good friends with the guys over at GPI. So I would definitely be interested in getting a set of heads, whenever they're off back order and getting GPI to port them. That sounds like that sounds like an alley I need to invest in.
Same for me.
Are you running OE castings now or aftermarket?
No, I'm running OE. I've got the factory. What is it, Jordan? 9. What heads on our cars?
L99 head. I don't remember what the cast is.
I don't know.
That.
Yeah, it's a factory L99 head. I mean, I've not been very disappointed with it. I'm running a Torque Storm supercharger. I think we made 774 on, like, I don't remember what timing. It wasn't very much. So I was pretty impressed, but I'm sure, like, I'm going to 416 stroker now. So I'd be pretty invested in seeing what that would do, what your head would do for my build. I mean, now that I'm forged bottom end, I'm not going to be afraid to kind of push some horsepower out of it if it's available.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it would be interesting to see because these heads are going to shine probably more on a supercharged application than turbocharged. Turbo is sensitive to better heads as supercharged or even naturally aspirated is.
Yeah.
Of course, getting the hollow stem valves, if compared to a heavy valve, is obviously it's going to help durability and RPM ability. We do have powder metal guides in our heads, because that's something else.
Yeah, that was interesting to me.
Yeah, because everyone else, and we did tons of durability testing at TrickFlow. We tried to get bronze guides to live with stock rockers. We used all types of exotic materials. We did tons of testing, and it didn't matter what we did, bronze guides wore. And so we came to market with powder metal guides. I was the guy that actually did the tooling development at TrickFlow to bring those powder metal guides to market. But TrickFlow sourced the powder metal guides. I never knew anything about the metallurgy. Well, as we were working on our heads the last many years, we did identify the manufacturer of valve guides for Chevrolet, and I was able to get in with them. And so they basically made us an LT1 guide that has metallurgy better than even an LT1 powder metal guide has. Because a bronze guide, when used to stock rockers, they will wear out.
For sure.
I don't care what you do, they will wear out. All the people that push bronze guides, all these machine shops, they'll tell you they're fine. The cylinder head manufacturers that make cylinder heads and bronze guides will tell you they're fine. They're not fine. They will wear out. When you pull a head, an LS head off of a truck with 300,000 miles, and it has 1/10,000th guide wear, that is a very impressive thing. And then you pull a set of aftermarket heads off a car with 15,000 miles, and it has 7,000th guide wear, 70 times as much in a fraction of the time. There's no doubt in my mind, that bronze guides are a problem. But to this day, there are shops that swear they're not a problem.
I think we talked about this last time you're on about how much wear you see with the bronze guides. That's something, I'm in the cylinder head market right now too, I got a 416 stroker I'm building, and I really don't want a guide like that. The powdered metal would be so much better.
Absolutely is. 100%. Yeah.
But Brian, we don't want to take up all your time here. It's been a pleasure having you on. I mean, there's always so much to talk about with you. These heads, I mean, I think us along with everybody else in the LS and space is just so fired up about these heads. So happy to finally see them make it to market. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna try to pick me up a set.
Same.
Yeah, they're absolutely game changing. And that ass cast head, because here's the reality of that ass cast head. Let's say the ass cast version loses 10 horsepower compared to the CNC head.
Yeah.
It's still 10 horsepower better than the absolute best LS3 heads we tested. Right? Because we tested all these aftermarket LS3 heads, and ironically, the top three pair were within 1 horsepower. And 2 were 12-degree design, and 1 was 11-degree design. And so then, if the ass cast head makes 10 more horsepower than those heads, and you bring it to market for $2,000 or something, you're going to, we're going to own, in my opinion, the
100%.
bolt-on cathedral port LS3 square port market. I think we're going to own it, 100%. Yeah,
Definitely. I couldn't agree more because, let me say it's going for like $400,000. Like, oh no, or $3,400. My bad, but
oh yeah, or 5,000.
right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed Brian. Of course, go check out BTR. He's got all kinds of products. He's got these new cylinder heads, and of course, BTR is the go-to for your camshafts. I mean, they always owned that game, in my opinion, and Jordan's as well. But yeah, Brian, I thank you so much for your time today, and hopefully we can have you back on whenever you get those heads ready to just be bolted onto a block.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, guys. With that being said, we're going to throw it to an outro, and we will see you in the next one. Post-editing Josh here, haircut. It's been a while since we recorded this episode, but I want to say if you guys sat through this marathon of an episode, please be sure to go on over to BTR and look for some stuff for your belt. I can't thank Brian enough for coming on our small little podcast to share information about his new cylinder heads and all the other products he has going on. If you don't have the money to buy some nice cylinder heads from Brian, I mean, that's your loss, but Brian's got a lot of other cool stuff going on. I particularly am super big on the new valve covers he's got, but here or there, guys, go check out Brian's stuff. And with that being said, guys, we will catch you in the next one. Brother, what are you still doing here? Check out some of these social medias below me. If you're not following, go change that today.